Dear friends of the Schiller Institute, Your Excellency, Ambassador Farouk, I'm very happy to be able to speak to you, even if it's only by video, because what you are trying to do in New York is of strategic importance. The question many people are asking themselves these days, where is a sign of hope for the future? Can one be optimistic about the future at all? Well, one could even ask the question more dramatically, is there going to be a future? Which is not a guaranteed question at this point. Many military experts agree that the strategic situation today is more dangerous than during the height of the Cuban crisis. And if you look at the policies proposed by such people as General Petraeus or Senator McCain, or if Hillary Clinton would do what she threatened in the election campaign if she would be president, namely to establish a no-fly zone in Syria, you have the immediate possibility for a direct military encounter between the United States and Russia, and the situation could get out of control instantly. Now, there have been many incidents in the last several months where US fighter jets were having almost encounters with US warships. And one Russian military expert said it quite adequately. He said, if the fate of mankind depends on the ability of a pilot to avoid an accident, we are really in very, very dangerous waters. Now, there is at the same time a full-fledged nuclear armament race. And at a recent conference, a military conference in Beijing, both Russian and military experts said that the US preparation for a first strike against Russia and China are very, very much advanced based on the prompt global strike doctrine. And that therefore Russia and China have to take appropriate countermeasures. Now, it is a complete illusion to think that you can win a regional nuclear war and that you can take out the second strike capability of a country like Russia, for example, if you think about the vast number of nuclear missiles distributed around the globe. Now, I think that we are therefore faced, and in the 1980s, when you had the middle-range missile crisis, people were extremely aware of the danger of nuclear war, and you had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. And now, where the danger, according to these experts, is more dangerous than during the Cuba Missile Crisis, and there is almost no public discussion or awareness of the situation. But that is maybe not the most acute and most traumatic crisis, but we are looking really at a complete civilizational crisis. Because look at the drug epidemic, the drug production coming from Afghanistan, Colombia, and other places, hitting so many people in the United States, driving them towards suicide. You have the unprecedented spreading of violence of police, but also pupils, students killing each other. You have a terrible brutalization of society. Look at the youth culture, which is completely barbarian. Well, so there is a very widespread cultural pessimism, at least in the transatlantic world. And the situation naturally in Southwest Asia is very, very desperate. And the African situation is equally horrible, so that alone this year, already officially more than 4,000 people drowned in the Mediterranean, trying to escape war and famine. So the big question is there a way out of this? Is there reason for hope? Can mankind turn the situation around? And I think there is. There are two factors which cause me to say that this situation can be remedied. One is that about 3 years ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping has launched the new Silk Road, which is the largest infrastructure project on this planet. It involves almost $2 trillion equivalent of investment. Already 100 nations and organizations are participating. It involves already 4.4 billion people. And it is based on infrastructure building, development, research, innovation, and it is improving the life for every country which participates. At the same time, China and the BRICS countries have developed a whole parallel system of banks, not devoted to casino speculation, but to investment in real industry. The Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, the New Development Bank, the Silk Road Fund, the Maritime Silk Road Fund, and all of these banks start to function and giving credit for investment. So that is an initiative which is spreading, and it could be potentially enlarged to reconstruct the countries which have been destroyed by war in Southwest Asia. Already between China and Iran, it has been built. It could be prolonged into Iraq, Syria. It could help to reconstruct Afghanistan and the entire region. So this is a realistic option. And just now, President Putin declared at the Valdai conference that Russia wants to take a big role in the reconstruction of the Middle East or Southwest Asia. And India had earlier said that they also want to take a big initiative in this. So there are signs of hope. But the second area has to come from the conscious decision that the world needs a new paradigm. That if we stay within the axioms of the present paradigm of geopolitics and globalization, I don't think we can solve it. What we need to do is a renaissance, a cultural renaissance, starting from the idea that man is not a beast. And that even if many people are behaving in a bestial way these days, man is the only creation or the only species which is capable of overcoming any limit of his own mind and of technological problems, of anything mankind wants to tackle, we can do. Now, that idea that mankind is the creative species must become the true identity of our species. Now, we have to start with a definition of what are the common aims of that human species. Well, we should look at where we want the future to be. Where do we want this human race to be in 1,000 years or in 10,000 years, which from the standpoint of universal history is a very, very small amount of time. And it is very clearly only going to be possible to survive if we move away from the so-called narrow interest of one country or a group of nations and define a geopolitical interest against another group of nations or a group of nations. In other words, geopolitics has to stop once and for all. We are now at a point where we have to be able to take the viewpoint of the astronauts, the cosmonauts, the taikonauts, looking from space on our planet. And what they see is a very small, fragile planet where you don't see borders, you don't see wars, you just see one planet, which, you know, is the place where the one human species lives. And from that viewpoint of these astronauts, you can also at least get a sense about the incredible deepness and width of our solar system, the galaxy, and our universe at large. And it is also clear that we must understand the laws of our universe much, much better than we do right now, and that we have to define our activities from the standpoint of finding the proper cohesion of man's activity with the lawfulness of the universe, and that is the only way how our long-term survivability will be guaranteed. It is what the great German space researcher Kraft Ericke called the extraterrestrial imperative, namely that only when man becomes a space-traveling species that we are forced to bring our activity into cohesion with the actual laws of the universe, because otherwise we cannot survive. It is also clear that we need a cultural renaissance, because it's never technology which is doing good or bad or evil. It is always man who brings these technologies to a good use or an evil use. And the Schiller Institute is called Schiller Institute because I believe that only through the aesthetical education of man, turning his creative ability free, that we can really live as human beings. And the image of how human beings will relate to each other in the future, will that be of geniuses like Planck and Einstein communicated, or Friedrich Schiller and Wilhelm von Humboldt and Goethe and other people from the German classical period. Now, I believe that Nicolaus of Cusa, who is the founder of the modern nation state and modern science, he lived in the 15th century, and he already said that the only reason why nations and cultures can communicate is because each of them produces scientists, artists, musicians, and people of belief in universal principles who can communicate with each other, because these universal principles are true everywhere, and that's why they're called universal. So I think that we need to have a new approach for a kind of Peace of Westphalia, for the Middle East or Southwest Asia in particular, because why did the Peace of Westphalia was able to end a period not only of the 30 Years' War, but of 150 years of religious wars? Because people recognized that if the killing would continue, that, you know, in the end there would be nobody left to enjoy the outcome. And Henry Kissinger, a couple of years ago, said the Peace of Westphalia applies everywhere, but not for Southwest Asia. And I think this is fundamentally false. And I think what we need to do is we have to have a global solution of the Silk Road becoming a world land bridge, and have an economic reconstruction program for the entire Southwest Asia region and also naturally Africa, and combine that with a cultural renaissance and a renaissance movement where people unite around this idea that the world has reached a point of barbarism, that if we continue on this path, we may not make it as a species. And therefore, I want to invite all of you to participate in creating a true worldwide Renaissance movement. Thank you.